Welcome to our home. My name is Dale Partridge, and I'm here with my wife, Veronica.
Hi.
Our hope is to help you cultivate a glorious Christian home. This episode is titled, What is a Home? Now, if you're new here, each episode is broken into two parts. Part one is available for free on every podcast platform. Part two is only available in the Relearn app. The Relearn app, if you haven't heard about it yet, is a library filled with theological content for the Christian life. We are adding content every single day, from audiobooks and ebooks to new videos. It is a great resource, and it's a great way to also support our ministry. A premium account you can get for $9.99 a month. You can also get a little bit of a discount for if you pay up front for the year. But we have hundreds of really great audiobooks, including all of my books in audiobook and ebook format there. You can just go to view the entire library if you want, just right now looking at your phone. If you just go to relearn.org/app, and you could scroll around. Some of the stuff is free you can listen to, but a lot of it is under the premium access. Well, in today's episode, we're going to be sharing our perspective on what is a home. In part one, we're going to be talking about really the father, the mother, and the child's role in the home. And then in part two, we're going to be talking about the actual physical homes part of the home, meaning the building, the actual ambiance of your home, as well as the location of your home, where you live, and why that can contribute to this culture that you're trying to establish in your home. So let's begin, and we will open up. And we do have a sleeping baby that is
We do.
on Veronica right now.
Yep.
And so we'll see how far we
Sleeping
get.
on my chest. So hopefully we can get through this. But if not, we'll just hand him off to our 10-year-old.
Yes, we have a 10-year-old now. That's weird. She just turned 10. So, okay, what is a home? And I'm really not asking the question, what is a house? But I'm asking the question, what is a home? Now, I gave a definition that I wrote out. And I wrote, a home is a sacred space where your generations are cultivated, nurtured, and instructed to glorify God. I think that's a pretty simple definition. And I want to just break that down just for a moment here. It's a sacred space. It's not a secular space. It's a space that is connected to God. It's a God-ordained space. And it's where your generations are cultivated. And the purpose of that cultivation is obviously to glorify God. That's the purpose of the human life. And so it's really the soil of where your descendants will grow from.
Mm-hmm.
And the home done right can change not just the lives of your children, but the lives of your grandchildren. And so, Veronica and I have often talked about the idea of, we're not just raising boys.
No, yeah, we're raising somebody's future husband, future leaders,
Mm-hmm.
future,
Fathers.
future fathers, future employees or business owners.
Yep. Yeah, protectors.
Whatever it is that they end up doing.
I think that perspective is important because when you're parenting, you're not just raising your children. In a sense, you're actually raising your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. How you establish the home under your care, your direct care, will indirectly disciple and shepherd and parent, in a way, your grandchildren. And I think we can see that with generational sin and generational problems. We have friends that are the Votbergs and the Johnsons.
Right.
They're like, what, third or fourth or fifth generation Christians?
Yes.
And kind of give a
just going to their just going to their house or going to family gatherings. We've been to a couple of the family's weddings and birthdays, and it's just so fruitful and amazing to watch because we were not raised that way.
Yeah.
We weren't raised in Christian homes, not that we were raised in atheistic type homes, but just, very cultural. Southern California cultural homes.
Yep.
And so to see that, I remember seeing that type of family, multi-generational Christians under one roof, celebrating together and enjoying one another and getting along, and just the fruit from grandma to parent to child to grandchild.
Yeah.
It was just so cool to see all of those generations together, and what a incredible blessing it was. It wasn't like anything we had ever seen growing up.
Yeah, to inherit, to be essentially a child of a Christian home with Christian parents, with Christian grandparents, with great grandparents that were believers as well.
Mm.
You have, by God's grace, been sanctified generationally, and you're starting to essentially see the fruit of that you were raised in a home that has been so far separated from so many of the ills and sins of the world. And so I just want to really point out that when we're raising our kids, we're raising our grandkids, and we're raising our great-grandkids, and we're raising essentially our generations to the glory of God. We live in a time where the house or the home has been reduced to a place of transactions. It's a tool. It's where we can eat and sleep, and we can store our belongings.
Yeah, it's like just your shelter.
It's your shelter. Yeah, it's we can play house, we can play roommates. There's a lot of that stuff going on in the culture, but it has not been viewed as a place to essentially build civilization. I think that historically we didn't necessarily think of it as a place to build civilization either. We just lived in a generation in the 1800s and back where the home just built the civilization. It wasn't how it was today, where essentially social media and work and social life is the most formative influences to build this generation and the culture of our civilization. And so what the home should be doing, the world is doing for a lot of people and a lot of families. The world is essentially shaping us more than the home is shaping us. And again, this is a foreign concept historically because there was no access to the world inside
in the palm of your
home.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no technology to have your cell phone in, you plug it in next to your head when you go to bed at night, and then you wake up and it's the first thing you reach for. Just in our culture and, millennials and under, basically, it's just everything is at your fingertips.
Well, and we had to work hard historically to culture our children, to get them out into the world. If we lived in a small town in rural Midwest in the 1700s,
right,
we wanted to get them into a city and to get them to understand some of the civilized life.
Yeah, because back then all they knew was home life, working on their farm, working with their hands, helping their mother churn the butter and milk the cow and mend the clothing. To be out in culture, to see things different from how things are at home was culture shock.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are on the opposite end, where we're trying to guard constantly against the world infiltrating our homes through media, through
shows the kids watch. I mean, that falls under media.
Yeah, tablets. But we also have like so much more travel. I mean, we are in cars and we have access to more people. We live in societies that are much bigger and lots that are much smaller, and we're closer to people than historically you'd be acres away from people. And so there's just a lot of influence on us that we need to guard in order to uphold the culture of our home. And I think a part of it is, again, just defining what is a home so that we can aim for that. I think when we don't have something to aim for, we miss it every time. And when you have, again, that definition that I said earlier, right? It's a sacred space where your generations are cultivated, nurtured, instructed to glorify God. And that's a broad definition, but I think it's going to be helpful for us to have a discussion around that. And so I'll say one more thing is, I often say the quote, if you don't catechize your children, the world will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we are talking about here. Actually, I wrote a catechism called Simple Theology. It's a gospel catechism for kids. And we've done catechisms in the past. We are, about to start that catechism with our own children. I've ran through a lot of those questions in the past with them. But we need to proactively catechize our kids, not just in the gospel, in all types of stuff, which we're going to talk about, because the world will catechize them around ethics and around virtues and around athletics and around philosophy and education and economics and politics and relationships and sexuality. I mean, if you don't absolutely catechize your kids in your home and use your home as an absolute machine of establishing and cultivating that generation.
And what a safe space for that to happen. And in a place where your children, you're catechizing them, but they're also in a place where they can ask you questions. And you're the first person they're going to hear these things from, likely. And you're the first person that gets to impart your knowledge and wisdom to them, when it comes to the questions that they have.
It's a benevolent place, right? Where you're having conversations around very touchy issues that are coming from the people who love you most, rather than the world who says, hey, I want to talk about sex. Let me show you this hardcore pornography. Mm-hmm. And so you're hearing about sexuality from an unloving and wicked parent. All right. Like if you count the media as a parent. And so instead of having the mom and dad talk about the biblical view of sexuality, you're going to get parented, either by the state or by the media. And so we want to make sure that we are controlling that home. And this, of course, this kind of outward attack on the home is certainly the cause of our cultural collapse, right? When the home falls, the culture falls. And I will say this, if we go upstream from the home, the reason the homes fall is because the church falls. And when the church is strong and it is constantly edifying and uplifting and sanctifying and teaching and instructing and correcting and guiding mom, dad, and children, when the church is strong, the families will be strong in the Lord. Yes, there is certainly spheres of authority there that are independent. So, they're not necessarily dependent upon one another, but they certainly complement one another. And so there's a big part of this around church, which we will talk about in part 2. But when you lost this kind of God-ordained means to cultivate Christian, moral, virtuous cultures, and when you don't have a home, you essentially look to the world. And that's the big dilemma. And this is why our country is collapsing. And Satan knows this. Satan really understands
the value of the home.
The value of the home. And he's a patient incrementalist, and he's a slow destroyer with strategy. And when the church is asleep, and the church, instead of getting out there, preaching the gospel, upholding truth, fighting back, if they just say, Lord, come quickly, and they hide in their house, and they don't actually go out and fight against these things, we just get overrun. And that's it's another conversation we'll have at some point. But I'll say this, Satan gets this. And this is why we have divorce rates that are still high and continuing to, people are saying they're dropping. It's only because nobody's getting married. Did you know, I just looked this up earlier, babe, that no fault divorce. So the idea that if you didn't have a reason like adultery, you could not get a divorce legally prior to 1969. Now,
wow, that's pretty recent.
Well, check this out. 1969 was the first state in the United States to legalize it. And guess what state it was?
Oregon.
No.
California.
Yep, California. Yeah. And
two states that we lived in.
The last state, I don't know what the last state was, but the last state to legalize it was 2010. So,
wow.
So we're not far away from no fault
But to
divorce.
think of 1969, like my parents were born in 1960.
Yeah, mine in the 50s.
And it's just like they were alive during that time.
Yep.
That wasn't that long ago where it was against the law to get a divorce without reason.
Biblical grounds.
Today it's like, I do what I want when I want.
Yep. I just don't like it
You're
anymore.
not filling my cup. I'm out.
Yeah. So Satan's attacking the home through divorce. The next thing I would say is sexual immorality. So pornography, gay culture, fornication. And I say gay culture because it's not just homosexuality. It's actually, there are many people in this world today that aren't gay, but act gay. They don't even realize it.
Because it's so infiltrated.
Yes.
In our world, and culture has, pulled this toxic masculinity thing where it's made men who may not even be gay, may not even be homosexual, become more feminine because they're so afraid of being masculine, because they're afraid of being torn down and
by the feminists
and even the feminist men out there. Like,
yes.
You need to be more emotional and sensitive and tender, and not that men cannot have those emotions, but they need to be expressing those things in a way that God designed them to as men, not in a way that God did not design them to as women.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say that when men start acting more and more effeminate, it eventually will materialize, not with everybody, but it has a trajectory to materialize in homosexual-like actions. And so if you start a kid off to be effeminate, it's not a shocking idea that 30 years later, he's, having perverted attractions to other men. So divorce, sexual immorality, pornography, all the things. Feminism, obviously, is an attack on the home. Let's get mom out of the home and destroy the home. Let's convince mom that submitting to a boss at, some employment and earning a paycheck has more value than shaping the generations of her family. Cultivating. When you look at it, you just are just shocked, because you're like, how could we have believed the lie that a woman has more value at work than in birthing and raising and shaping the morals and virtues and character of like the next generation? It is like the most vital human role regarding, culture shaping. And I think that's why feminism is so strong. I mean, I don't want to say that the dads aren't important. The dads are vital, but it's like to drop mom out. I would say that, single dads versus single moms, I don't know what situation's better, but sometimes with the babies, you just need mom. I mean, men are designed not to be nurturers of little children. I always tell people, you can use the table as an ironing board in a pinch. It's not what it's designed to do. It'll work. And that's how a man is caring for our 6-month-old baby. It's like, I can be the ironing board right now in a pinch, but at the end of the day, I'm not designed for this the way that you're designed for this.
Yeah.
The other two things I'll say quickly is disobedient children. Obviously, we have a culture of disobedience. And then the last thing would be independence and individualism. Satan is working hard to establish a constant sense of autonomy, where your kids are not owned by you. Your family is independent pieces, not a covenant community of God. like, again, it's part of globalism, right? The idea that we're all just kind of one big human race. We don't have nations or tribes or states or local or whatever it might be. But so there's just a massive thing around individualism and independence that Satan knows. So all these attacks, right? Divorce, sexual immorality, feminism, disobedient children, independence and individualism, all at the center of the attack on the home. And so I'm just going to say this, that the home, when its members are rightfully and joyfully carrying out their roles, becomes this machine to produce generations of people. And when everyone is operating in their roles, it will produce quality results. Minimal sin, minimal pain, minimal conflict, maximum virtues, maximum maturity. And so there's just so much value in the reality of a biblical home. So I want to start with talking about what is the father's role. I know I've been talking a bit here, but Veronica will get a chance to talk in a minute because we're going to go about what is the mother's role. So we're going to
I'm also the type of person that is just content not talking.
Yeah.
So it's not like Dale's overrunning me here. I just listen.
Yeah. She's got to be encouraged to get out in front and have some conversation here. So what is the father's role? I think I've broken down basically 5 points for every one of these 5 points, right? So we have the father's role, the mother's role, the children's role, the home's role, and the location's role or the destination's role. And so the father's role, I'm going to say point number 1 is vision. A husband, a father needs to have vision for the home. Where there is no vision, the people perish. I don't know exactly what proverb that is, but vision is such a vital part. Now, our home, I'm just naturally like this. I'm a visioneer.
And I'm naturally not like this. So I am very blessed by that gifting that the Lord has given you, because when I feel overwhelmed or I'm stressed out or something, I'll often just come back to you and be like, okay, where are we going again? What's the point of this? And you're very good at keeping me on track.
So I know that there are couples out there that have husbands that struggle with vision. We have guys in our church that we love that are good, godly men. Mm-hmm. It's something that needs to be cultivated if it's not currently a strength. And vision, I think, needs to be from, maybe mission statement to where are we going? What's the 10-year? What's the 2-year, the 10-year, the 30-year? What's our great grandchildren? Like having some of that long-term vision around values and morals and ethics and career and business and investment and estate planning, all of those things. And having vision for expectations for where kids and family and parents and home should be at certain points on that timeline, I think is another expectation. Not expecting 15-year-old results from your 10-year-old and not expecting, certain numbers, a certain amount of wealth, too early, or understanding when you're behind. And if you're in your 30s and you still don't have a savings that's sufficient and you've been married for 10 years, there's a problem there. And so how do you have a vision? And I think you can execute that vision with schedules. So you take that long-term vision and you orchestrate a day-to-day operation.
Short-term goals.
Yeah, that essentially achieve that long-term vision.
Right.
So I think it's a very masculine thing. The second thing is provision. You need to be a provider. You need to be able to provide for your family. I was in the business world, as I told you guys in the last episode, for many, many years, 20 years or so. And I learned to be a great provider of income in that season of life. When I got into ministry, I thought, I am totally done talking about business. And then I realized that the number one discipleship for men is often, outside of just maybe gospel doctrine, is to teach them how to make money and how to save, how to budget.
Yeah, how to be good providers for their families.
Yeah. And
especially the younger guys who are newlyweds.
Yeah, how to control your spending. So provision, and now provision can also include provision of spiritual and theological training, and it can be a provision of other means. So the next thing would be protection. And protection is going to be from front doors and security systems all the way to modesty in the way that your children, dress and your wife dresses, to spiritual care, to training them in sexual and gender ethics, so that they're not attacked by. So there's protection is a wide range of means, but you need to be a protector. You need to always be on guard. How many times that we both do this in our own ways, but there's a show on and I hear just some subtle, message that's gayness or trans,
some type of agenda.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, let's turn that off.
We're done with that.
Yeah. My protection, comes up, boom.
I mean, I still remember you doing that with a book that we had gotten, and I'd never read it before. And I sat down and read it with Ari. This is years ago. Sat down and read it with Ari, and you overheard it from the kitchen or living room or something. And you're like, let me see that book. And I gave it to you, and it completely went over my head. And now looking back, I can see it. But at the moment I was like, I don't see what you're talking about. And you had one of the boys throw it in the fireplace.
Yes, exactly. And that's part of the catechism, right? It's catechizing your kids to show this is what this deserves fire. The fourth thing I would say is catechism. And I'm specifically talking about theological catechism. Taking your kids theologically. It doesn't mean you have to do a catechism. It means you are constantly bringing them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. That's literally an instruction. It says, fathers, raise your children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And for example, right now I'm reading a 5-part series on biographies for children.
Right.
Of
great theologians of the past.
Yeah. Charles Spurgeon, Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield. What's it called?
Oh man.
Oh, it's right there. Grab it. Because then I can tell people that are going to ask
Trailblazers.
Trailblazers. Yeah. They have a 5-part series that you can grab. Really good.
Well, that's the one on just preachers and teachers.
Yes.
The Trailblazers has other, 5-part series on other, missionaries or whatever.
And they're good for me. I even enjoy them.
Oh yeah, they're really enjoyable to listen to.
And even your 5-year-olds can enjoy them.
I mean, even at night, at the end of the night, the kids will be like, Jonathan Edwards. Yeah. They're eager to hear you read more.
And you get so many opportunities to preach the gospel or have a discussion around something because of that. So that'll look that way at times for me, or it'll also manifest in actual catechisms or just theological discussions or whatever it is. But we have a time basically every day that I do that with the kids. The fifth and last thing for fathers for building godly homes is joviality. And this is a one that I would say I was naturally good at, and then I got sick. And sickness has a way to take joy out of your life.
It just kind of wears you down after a while. But yeah, you are generally naturally a very happy person. But yeah, the last 4 years, I would say 3 or 4 years has been a little bit harder for you in that area.
So joviality, it's just essentially being positive, uplifting K-Love. I just think about that. Don't listen to that. But, I think the joy of the Lord is our strength. Our strength in the face of trials and difficulty is the joy. We don't have conditional joy. We have unconditional joy. We can have joy in all circumstances because of God and the gospel. And so I would say an example of this would be are you pessimistic or are you optimistic? Do you have hope as a father? Are you looking down at your generations and it's only going to get worse?
He's always negative and cynical about whatever the topic is.
It's just going to get terrible. And are you conveying that drudgery of a life and future, or are you like optimistic and in the fight and uplifting and let's go, let's get it? That joviality is very important. So I'll close this section just on the father's role with just a scripture, Deuteronomy 6:6-9. And these words I command to you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be like frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates. End quote. I would say that passage of scripture is written to the men. This is a patriarchal culture when this is written. And so men, you really do need to essentially model and demonstrate that reality.
Yeah, lead your home in that way.
Yeah. All right, so we have a baby that's starting to wake up, which is perfect timing for Veronica to start taking her part.
Yeah, isn't this so typical of motherhood?
Right.
As soon as somebody needs you for something, your kid needs you for something else.
Yes. So do you want to start? I have the 5 things for a woman or mother is nurture, manage, glorify, educate, and festive learning.
Festive learning. Yeah. Nurture. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory in the word alone. Manage the home. I think that's a big thing, at least in our home, in our family culture, is a role that I take on most of that. Just because you are a pastor, because you're in full-time ministry, me managing the home is my way of ministry to you and to our church body, so to free up your time so that way you can go carry out your pastoral duties. So I'm carrying a lot of that at home, and to glorify, just to beautify and whatever comes in your home, whether that's, meals or
money
yeah,
that comes in,
using it wisely. Educate. We homeschool. Not everybody homeschools. But even if you don't homeschool, to take your child's education seriously, thinking about ways that you can direct everything back to Christ, because everything is rooted back into Scripture and back into Christ. Whether it's science or math, all of those things can be brought up in Scripture. And then festive learning catechizing through celebration, decorating, making the holidays fun, making birthdays fun, experiences, whether it's the way that you decorate or the things that you do, the traditions that you guys create. I know lots of families do this. Our daughter just turned 10. And so we always have a time on each one of our kids' birthdays where we have time to encourage them and talk with them. And
we go around the room.
Yeah, go around the room. Each sibling and each parent will say something that they, what we love about that person and things that we're happy to see that they've grown in and what we're hoping for them in their future. Just these little small, at least this is my approach. I try and do small ways to celebrate and to have very little traditions that are not super overwhelming for me on my part, but have meaning and things that, it gives the kids something to look forward to. For Christmas, the night we get our Christmas tree, I usually will read them a book called The Legend of the Christmas Tree, and which is history of that, or reading them things about, I've got a baby that's a little wiggly, about the story of St. Nicholas and who St. Nicholas was, or, we've got Valentine's Day coming up. Who is St. Valentine? And so I just use those opportunities as teaching moments, but also still make them fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you've done a good job of trying to create, again, catechizing through celebration. You're upholding the vision through the daily and monthly and weekly or whatever rituals that we do and traditions in our home that show, because what celebration does is it shows our It shows what is valuable. It teaches, like, this is why I'm actually writing a book right now on Christmas, and holidays by a country, a timetable, dominion, if you want to call it that. It actually really demonstrates to a culture and a city what's valuable. What should we celebrate? What should we love? What should we uplift? Why do you think that Pride Month is a thing? Because it's not a day. It's an entire month to lift up and teach the culture what we should care about. And so in a home, you can have these little holidays, these little memorials, these little moments that we teach our kids what is valuable. And we do that through a variety of things throughout the year, and your family does too. And if you don't, the world will. That's why we should take timetable dominion, which will be a part of what I'm talking about in that next book. But so the children's role, as I have a 6-month-old in my hands right now, there's five points again for this, and this is the last point for this section. Part 1 is we have obedience, honor, apprenticeship, assistance, and propagation. And, again, I think of Ephesians chapter 6, right? Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And so obedience, as you guys probably know if you're parents, is a constant battle. I mean, we are constantly training our kids at different levels of obedience, right? So, when you're tiny and you're 6-month-old and he wants to bite you, you do a little hand tap and say, no, 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 or when they're older, you might be, doing other forms of discipline and spanking or whatever it may be. And then you have timeouts and taking things away and whatever it is. But then as you get the kids a little bit older, Aria's 10, and I'm having a lot more conversations around that and trying to instill morality and understanding and comprehension behind that. I like what Doug Wilson said. He said that, a lot of parents are real loose when they're small, and then they become teenagers and all of a sudden they tighten up.
Yeah, it needs to be flip-flopped.
And it needs to be flip-flopped where you should be super tight. Like you're living in an absolute, authoritarian, compound.
While still loving your child.
Yeah. But like you're just like, they have very little freedom when they're little. And
the leash is really short when they're young. And as they get older, you give them a little bit more slack. You give them a little bit more slack, and they turn 5, 6, 7, and they have an issue. You tighten that leash up again a little bit.
And by the time they're 13, 14, 15,
they can walk off leash.
You should be, if they're not off leash, you got a problem, right? And so I'm planning for 5 years from today that I want Aria to be able to be essentially off leash, but living in our home, so that she can make decisions on all types of things as she would when she's 18,
but under the protection of you,
of our home, and because I don't want her to have to learn
guidance.
I don't want to have to say like learn those things when she's 18 to 21. Like I want her to have that stuff.
Well, because when a lot of teenagers in today's culture is, I'm 18, woo, I'm at a mom and dad's house, and they go crazy.
Yeah.
Where if they have a lot more freedom while they're still under your roof, you get to talk with them about some of the decisions and choices that they've made and why, and have some of those deeper conversations with them.
Yeah, I think one of Doug's kids said that when they turned 15, they said you can watch any movie you want. The only rule is that you have to watch it in our home and you have to have a conversation about it at the dinner table. And so, you have the freedom to have those things. You just need to be willing to be ashamed if you watch something that was shameful, So obedience, honor, I would say, we have a son named Honor. Honor is a form of respect, and we don't honor our fathers. I believe that passage of scripture is specifically talking about, I would say it's directly talking about our fathers, but it's indirectly talking about our forefathers in a variety of dimensions. And so we live in a generation where we want to trailblaze new paths. And the Bible actually says, take the old paths, Like before you break out a new road and a new way, why don't you learn why that road is built and why there was a fence on the right side so you don't crash before you start going the other way? Be humble enough to realize I'm part of a historical reality here, and there's things that I don't know. One author said, denying history is like being a leaf, not knowing that you're a part of a tree. And honor is like humbly coming to dad and mom and going, why did we do it this way?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's biblical and godly, maintaining that honor and respect in a variety of ways. So that's a short definition. I'll say the next one is apprenticeship. And, I don't know, would you say that we're trying to are we training Aria to be, a girl boss, or are we training her to be, a mom and a mother and a wife? I mean, we are offering apprenticeship. Now, certainly we want her to learn and we want her to have a good education and we want to cultivate
I would say apprenticeship is just allowing your children to come alongside you in whatever it is that you're doing, which is not always easy for me. I can tend to be like, let me just do it. It's just easier for me and quicker. But I always need to be reminded of the value it is to have my children at my side when I'm folding laundry or washing dishes or making a dessert or dinner, whatever it is. I do that more so with Aria, and we'll be doing that more so with the boys. I've noticed it more as they're getting a little bit older. That you're running to go do something, run an errand, and you'll bring one of the boys with you, or now usually both of them.
Yeah, and I would say we live in historically, there's been a thing that like you would do what your dad did. This is what you would do. Like to branch off would be a somewhat abnormal reality. If your dad was a carpenter, what was Jesus going to be? If his dad was a carpenter, he's going to be a carpenter's son. And so there's historically that you followed the generational paths regarding labor and duty and provision. And there's actually a real benefit in that. For example, think about starting over when you could actually just take over where your dad left off.
Pick up where he left off, and Lord willing, leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
You're growing in your skill. If you're already that gifted and skilled as a young man, it's only going to get better.
And that's why I tell people, if you can start a business, do it, because you can't hand down a job. You can hand down a business. And so I'm a pastor. Are my kids going to be pastors? I don't know, but they might be servants of the church in some way. Our little one here, who's 6 months, his name's Deacon. And we always make the joke that maybe he'll become an elder in a church and he'll be Elder Deacon.
Or Deacon.
Or Deacon. And so we're we also have a ministry, and we do publishing, and it would be strange for my family, not impossible, but strange for my boys to just go off and do something completely different. That's part of that individualism and autonomy and independence, where we want to make our own way, when we need to highlight the absolute blessing of apprenticeship is that, no, you can take over where I left off. That's what heirs do. And so I just want to cultivate more of that in our home, where our boys will be a part of, it's an assumption. It's not a demand, but it's an assumption that you guys are going to come and do work at Relearn, and you're going to do work at Kingsway, and you're going to do work at Reformation Seminary, or whatever we're doing at that time.
Yeah. And I think our job now is, the children are young, is, we're the observers. We get to see how the Lord has gifted each one of our children in these in whatever unique way he is, because they're not all the same. They all have different skill sets and things that they're interested in. And if we desire them to be involved in ministry, desire them to be involved in whatever it is that our family is doing. Sorry, our baby's getting a little bit rowdy here. We have to look at the unique way that God has gifted them in their skill sets and their interest in, and show them that there is a place for them here in the ministry. There is and just, how to steward that skill into an area that would suit them best.
And that God placed them in this family. And that's evidence enough that you are called to continue this legacy that we have in this family. And so that's another element. The last two are assistance and propagation. And I would say assistance, really, I think of 1 Timothy 5:4. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before the Lord. And so the idea of assistance is that children are a great assistance to their parents. They should continue to help their parents in the duties to uphold the vision and culture of that home. And then the last thing I would say is propagation, and which is really the action of upholding or spreading a particular culture. And so they should be not just culture submitters or culture learners, but actually culture propagators, which that would result in really multi-generational propagation. And so that you're carrying out that patriarchal vision, also the matriarchal blessings, those things are coming out throughout multiple generations. And so those are the three things. There's two more things that we're going to talk about in part 2. And we're going to talk about the dwelling's role, our actual home, and we'll talk about our destination's role. These things are vital to building a biblical and Christian and glorious home. A home, again, the word glory something's glorious when it's doing what its God-given design is to do. And so we want to be glorious husbands and glorious wives because we are walking out our God-given design for those roles. And we want glorious homes. We want a glorious home. We want to know what that looks like. What is a glorious home? And again, I think this is part of it, what we've talked about today. We're learning as well. But in part 2, we are going to be talking about the dwelling's role in building a great, glorious home. And I think we got a lot of fun conversation around that. And then the destination, choosing a place to live where your descendants will live for generations. And so that's going to be a great thing that's available in part 2. So on that note, thank you guys for listening to this episode of Welcome Home. Again, you can listen to part 2 exclusively in the Relearn app. You can check that out at relearn.org/app. And if you're a regular listener to Welcome Home, would you leave a review? You don't need to write anything. You could just tap the stars in your podcast app, but leaving a review really does help the exposure of the show. On that note, my name is Dale Partridge.
And I'm Veronica Partridge.
And we will see you guys next time.